Hello, everyone. Well, as always, I hope that you're doing well. This week, like most weeks when Congress is in session, has been a flurry of activity with little accomplishment. It seems like every week the House of Representatives is running down a new rabbit trail, trying to capture some hot-button issue just to make news, without ever addressing the real problems that are facing this nation. There were plenty of issues to keep the media busy this week. Average gasoline prices went above $5 per gallon. Inflation continues to rise. Real wages are actually going down. Violent crime is continuing to grow across the nation, and a man was actually arrested trying to assassinate Justice Kavanaugh, and he has been charged with attempted murder. However, the top priorities of the Democrats this week was the prime-time premiere of their January 6th committee. As many of you are probably aware, I have recently become one of the targets of this illegitimate committee. So you may ask, why do I call the committee illegitimate? Because the committee was not organized according to the law that the Democrats passed forming this committee. You see, the law requires that the minority leader, Kevin McCarthy, selects the 5 Republicans that are to serve on the committee, and the Speaker of the House selects the Democrats. However, Nancy Pelosi didn't like the Republicans that Kevin McCarthy selected, so she refused to seat them on the committee, and she hand-selected 2 Republicans that she wanted to serve. Since the committee was not formed according to the law, then the committee is illegitimate and therefore has no jurisdiction or subpoena power. Furthermore, there was never a need for this committee. There are already standing committees in the House that have jurisdiction over the security of Capitol Hill. I serve on one of those committees, and we had already begun investigating how there was such a flagrant failure in securing the Capitol that day. But just as we were beginning to make some headway, the committee leadership, which is Democrats, suddenly stopped any hearings on this issue and turned the focus of the committee back to a federal takeover of future elections. Having standing committees such as House Administration working on an issue like this ensures that there will be objective investigation without undue partisan bias, because that is built into the rules of the committee. But that isn't what Nancy Pelosi wanted from any investigation into the events of January 6th. You see, she wanted full control not only of what the committee investigated, but what evidence they could report and what the final narrative will be. In other words, Pelosi had already determined the outcome, and she just wants a committee to build evidence to that conclusion. The fact that she has given the committee the power to request documents from a wide variety of sources, except they're not allowed to request any documents from the Speaker of the House, well, that's enough proof that the committee isn't seeking the truth, only how to effectively blame former President Trump and Republicans for the attacks of January 6th. We can expect a lot more drama than truth from this committee, especially since they have hired a former ABC executive to help orchestrate the primetime hearings over the next few weeks. So for the few people that do watch this show, buckle up. It will likely be one of the most intriguing fictional reality TV shows airing this summer. Former President Obama's Chief of Staff, Rahm Emanuel, once stated, "Never let a serious crisis go to waste. It affords an opportunity to do things you couldn't do before." This statement has become the standard operating procedure for Democrats in Washington, D.C. The framers of our Constitution, however, understood the danger of Congress quickly and emotionally reacting, so they put into place a system of legislating that is purposefully slow and methodical. But when Congress takes time to investigate, determine the source of a problem, and then come up with a valid solution, then the crisis is no longer making hourly headlines, so you lose an emotional edge. Taking advantage of a crisis while you still have the emotional edge is exactly what the Democrats did this week in the House of Representatives as they passed 2 anti-gun bills. None of the bills that Nancy Pelosi rushed to the floor will do anything to curb violence, protect children in schools, or even save lives. Most of the provisions in these bills are so draconian, they will more than likely be thrown out in court. In fact, some of the provisions have already been deemed unconstitutional by the Supreme Court in previous cases. Now, the Democrats pushing these bills, they know this, but instead of focusing on the real problem, which is how to effectively secure our schools and protect our children, They want to rush these things to the floor that only empowers government without doing anything to actually address the problem. Neither of these anti-gun bills are likely to pass the Senate. So again, it was an exercise in futility by Nancy Pelosi and House Democrats to have an issue that they can go back to the American people and say, look, we tried to do something, even though what they're doing will have no effect. Now, when Republicans take over the House in January, we have to ensure the work we do is to address the real problems, not just window dressing so you can make headlines or can use it as a campaign issue. That's what the Democrats are doing now. We have to effectively address the issues that are important to the American people. Also this week, there was even more bad economic news as the inflation numbers came out showing that the Consumer Price Index is the highest it's been in over 40 years, coming in at 8.6%. And unfortunately, it's estimated to continue to climb. This is even worse news than Biden's economists thought it was going to be, as most of the economists thought it would be at 8.3%. But instead of admitting that their big government socialist policies are failing the American people and causing the problem, the White House and Nancy Pelosi continue to ignore these issues and focus on things that empower government, not the people. For instance, when the police arrested a man from California who attempted to assassinate Judge Kavanaugh, many Republicans called on the Speaker to bring to the floor legislation that increases the security for Supreme Court justices. Pelosi unbelievably responded by saying there wasn't any such legislation ready and it would take time to write such a bill. However, when she made that statement, I immediately called her bluff by pointing out that the Senate had already passed this bill and it's been sitting in the queue of the House for weeks just waiting on the Speaker to bring it to the floor. She could have easily called that bill up this week, but apparently she didn't want to bring attention to the attempted assassination of Kavanaugh since the perpetrator was actually a pro-choice activist. But instead, she wanted to totally focus on the anti-gun legislation that actually is not going to go anywhere and is not going to do anything to make people safer. And finally, a poll was released this week that shows what the true issues Americans care about really are. And those are the price of gasoline, inflation, immigration, and crime. But instead of having any committee hearings on these issues, Nancy Pelosi is focused on her pet project of casting blame of the January 6 riots on Republicans. It's beyond time to stand up to the bad policies, the misinformation, lies, and slander that the House Democrats and their allies in the mainstream media keep pushing out of their offices in Washington, D.C. We have to be boldly standing up for truth and doing what is right. You see, doing what is right isn't easy, and it isn't always popular, but doing what is right will always be the right thing to do. As we reconvene Congress this coming week, I will be working harder than ever to stop their destructive agenda and to expose their lies and hypocrisy. Together, we can hold them accountable and restore our nation, our values, our economy, and our freedom. God bless you, and God bless America.